afternoon, everyone, from my side as well. My name is Maaret Pyhäjärvi. I come from Finland. I was looking at the program originally, and I was looking at a location called Helsinki, which is definitely the city I'm from, but everyone else was from a country. So maybe I've been assuming you know where Helsinki is. The story that I'm here to tell you today is a learning story from a personal experience. I went to a job interview a few years ago, and I learned so much starting from that job interview that I felt like it needs to be shared from a stage like this. And I think there's a lot of takeaways for various people on this one. So what happened basically is that I'm trying to make it a little smaller there. Is that GitHub Copilot emerged before ChatGPT came around. So this whole generative AI that we're now talking about as kind of like trying to figure out how we would use it, it's now been around for a few years. And already before this generative AI came about, I was working on AI applying that for testing in my previous place of work, actually 2 different jobs ago. I'm usually moving companies every 2, 3, 4 years. So when years pass, I've had a few different places that I've worked at. But when this generative AI started from a point of view of our industry, actually GitHub Copilot was kind of like an early introduction. The interest level definitely came about only at the point when ChatGPT then later came around. But already at the time on 2021, when GitHub Copilot launched, I was lucky enough to work with open source projects and get early access to this particular tool. And I know the exact time when I got access to this tool well, I went back to my calendar and checked that about a week after it was launched, and I already got it on the first days, I went to a job interview for a mid-European tech company, kind of like one of those big name companies that I do not want to name anyway. But as part of that job interview, since I had GitHub Copilot for 1 week back then, what I could do is I could have it installed in my IDE. The pair programming interview that I end up doing while having it on my IDE, the other programmer that I was working with wasn't yet aware of these tools. Like all of that was also new and had some impact on the interview situation. But also I kind of get to this experience where when the developer that I paired with wouldn't help me with certain things that I wanted to do, then the Copilot was actually available as the third person in that pairing and did some of the work for me. So we'll talk about that experience a bit more. But all of this kind of like, in timeline, after I had that interview and after I passed that interview, after I was offered that job that I then ended up declining because I didn't particularly enjoy the idea that you would have a pair programming interview, which is actually not pair programming at all, but it is just an assessment where I have to be both these roles of the developer and the tester, and I get assessed mostly for developer related work. Then, ChatGPT came around. I've used that ever since, and now we're here today to talk about the experience and the reflection that all of this is a part of. So, talking about the job interview, what basically happened is well, obviously I had these regular conversational interviews first. I got to meet the CEO of the company. They wanted to talk about the ideas that I would be one of the first people who would be a tester by trade in that particular company. There were hundreds of developers, but no one who was specializing in testing at that point. I also learned in those interviews that I would be not only the first tester in the organization, I would also be the first woman in that organization. So kind of like coming with a technical background with all of these kind of being the first of everything, there's a bit of load there already. But I was kind of excited about the idea that after we had the CEO conversation, we had the team level conversation, the third part of the interviewing was this pair programming interview. And I wanted to, of course, like anyone would want to prepare for it as well as you could. And luckily, with GitHub Copilot available for 1 week before that, I could prepare, and the preparation was mostly learning GitHub Copilot and being really excited about the kinds of things you can do with generative AI. I chose a particular thing that I mostly practiced with. I mostly practiced with the Roman numerals kata, and Roman numerals kata is one of those examples where you give a number, like you say 5, and then you're supposed to get as an output, you're supposed to get V, which is the Roman numeral for number 5. And I practiced some TDD related things because I knew that was probably something that they would be expecting me to work in a pair programming session with a developer. But I also did a lot of preparation around kind of like the things that I would want to show that I think they weren't expecting or they wouldn't guide me into. So going in as the tester into this kind of a setting where they have no experience of working with testers, I wanted to show already in that interview and in that preparation there would be things where I can contribute something more. So kind of like, assuming somebody else programs the things with me or for me, I can point out problems in that moment. But also I can take a look at whatever we've created in whatever scope we have created. I can look at the outputs and patterns of that output using approval tests, and then figure out kind of like easier access to exploring even on unit testing level, which I expected that this interview would be about. So I created approval test for Roman numerals kata. Approval test is this idea where you have a golden master. So you kind of capture the output into a file, and then you can visually verify it. You can say, I approve, this looks good. Also, you can use rules like, works in production. That's the oracle. If it currently works this way, it must be correct. You already probably verified it because you built it. And if it ever changes, I will then be notified. So approvals is that kind of an approach. But I also did things like looking at Wikipedia pages. I learned a lot of things about Roman numerals. For example, I learned that you can have numbers larger than 3999, which is the usual upper limit for Roman numerals, as long as you add a hat on top of the Roman numerals letter. Then you can get times 1,000 for any of the numbers. So you have a lot bigger space, but you need to introduce a new font. I also learned over time about Roman numerals. I learned, for example, that Roman numeral for number 4 is actually III, if the domain is the clock towers or luxury watches, kind of like if you have a luxury watch, it doesn't say IV, but it says III. So old clock towers and luxury watches have this kind of rule. And 5 is 5I letters if the domain is tombstone. So I learned and I had a lot of information about Roman numerals out of all this exploration. And all of that I did kind of like, combining my exploratory testing expertise, but also kind of like putting together things where Copilot was being my programmer that I could practice with. So going then into the interview, I had a developer and I was trying to suggest the developer that they would write the program. They wanted the numbers to text program, and they absolutely blunt out refused. They wouldn't write the program. They said, I have to write it. So I said, like, well, I have Copilot. I don't really care about writing that program so much. I would like to focus on testing it. So, do you mind if I allow Copilot to generate it for me? And just like it could generate me 10 different examples to choose from, and then choose by reviewing for the Roman numerals kata, I could do the exact same thing for the numbers to text. So from a comment, I want to implement this kind of a program. I could generate a program that we could together review, say, this looks good enough, this looks the right kind of thing, and now let's focus on testing of that. So what we did in the session, these are the actual examples from that session on what we built there together. We took a piece of code that was basically generated from just asking a function to convert integers to English for values from 0 to 9999. So I got this kind of like a basic implementation. I had a basic helper for the approval test that it would allow me to generate all of the numbers. And with approval tests, I could just kind of like, say that, we look at that code, we don't see if it's right or wrong in that moment, but we can figure it out by testing it. And looking at all of the numbers, well, 1,000 is probably not correct. You would want a rule that says only 1,000, because that would be the correct way of saying it. And similarly, choosing different implementations out of the list of 10 options that GitHub Copilot was already back then giving me. I could get to finding problems like extra spaces or the values where after 20 it was actually always incorrect. So we had a really lovely session of testing things and having a conversation about testing. And we ended up also within that hour that we had for the pairing session, we also ended up trying some TDD style things, because that was the idea that the developer really came into the session with. So we did some kind of like, okay, so let's do a like an empty file, one becomes one, and this is the kind of thing that I would do, and this is how I would then turn it into code. I was like, okay, fine. So I have had enough experience on turning simple katas of TDD into something usable. But I managed to kind of show, I think at least, I managed to show, again, being offered the job kind of says that I didn't do badly in that session. So I managed to get offered the job of we would like to work with you. And eventually I then decided that being the first woman and the fact that I am being assessed in this style, and there's no kind of like, jumping into actively pairing with me, and I would have to face that kind of like assessment mentality, maybe later on as well, that it wasn't the right choice at that time for the work that I would be doing. But this is really just the starting point. This was the interview that happened already a few years ago, but this was really just the starting point for me to then start using GitHub Copilot on real life projects. I got it into use in my then work at Vaisala. And my colleagues were saying things like this about the Copilot when I enabled them to start using it, that they absolutely love the auto-completion that you get out of it. And it feels like you don't have to write the boilerplate code anymore, but you still get to write all of the interesting and complicated things. And sometimes, the fun out of seeing the funny things or the mistakes that gets generated, not just assuming that they're always correct, but you being on that kind of like driver's seat, it also makes the work a little bit more fun when you have tools like this in your use. So Googling changed into having that information in the IDE at our fingertips. So for me, what I learned out of this interviewing and using Copilot was basically the idea that whenever we are using these code generating tools, whether it's for test automation generation purposes, whether it's for purposes of writing unit tests and writing the application code, we are always the ones who are accountable. Some people say that, in the future, we won't have developers and testers, we will have alignment engineers, and those alignment engineers can come from either one of the two trades that I'm here kind of comparing and contrasting. But whoever is that alignment engineer, no matter what the title for that person is, that person is supposed to be accountable. So you have to test, and you have to test a lot. You have to test against the intent and verify the implementation. Like you have to review it, but you have to also look at the outputs, because it's really easy not to notice those logic mistakes that even the simple numbers to text example was showing me. You have to know and want to learn the domain, not just as a layman, but also as the expert who knows that Roman numerals, for example, are different for simplified Roman numerals in Excel and the regular Roman numerals in Excel. There's actually 4 different sets of rules in Excel for Roman numerals. And you have these kind of differences and fine-tuned rules in pretty much anything that you might be testing at some point. You probably want to do some kind of a comparison for Roman numerals in particular after this session. I continued and I implemented a comparison where my program of Roman numerals that I generated with Copilot was compared with Playwright to a website that Wikipedia mentioned as the best implementation or best reference. So I compared that. I actually learned even more about the different values and could verify on a scale that without automation I wouldn't be able to explore. And all of the error cases, kind of like people doing weird things. I ended up learning things about binary numbers, hexadecimals, particular characters that I could insert there, the values, minimum and maximum values. And I even learned about the fact that for Roman numerals, for example, there is a concept of fractions. So it's not just the larger numbers, but there's also fractions that you can express with Roman numerals. And there were plenty of also interesting side effects, things that I didn't kind of like, imagine that I would need to test against, but spending enough time with this problem and spending enough time with this problem with various people on this example after I got started with the interview, it really taught me a lot about the application. So more time with your applications, with the mindset of exploratory testing and curiosity, really gave me a lot of things that help me then drive whatever I create with generative AI on the code side. But all of this was a lot easier because I had the tools. So then, reflecting that I've been doing this now for 2001, 2005, 4 years. There's certain lessons that really have stuck with me from that time frame. First of all, I've started to realize that the current area of AI, there's a lot of this kind of marketing smokescreen. Some of it is intentional. We name the thing with a different name and we say it's entirely different than the previous thing. And we really need to dig into and be kind of curious and even inquisitive about some of the features that are being marketed. So there's a lot of similarities, but new names, new concepts being introduced in the space of this generative AI. And there's a lot of parallels also from that interview and the surprises we got in that interview, the surprises in the tool promises. So again, hands-on, habitual use of these tools, you learn so much more. So if you haven't yet started using generative AI tools, whether it's for generating text and maybe writing articles and books, or whether it's for generating code and creating test code or application code, now is a good time to get started and start growing that tree of having your practical, habitual foundation. Another thing that I have really picked up things on was on pairing. And I really love the idea that you can pair with people, well, actually with AI at time when people are not available. It might be that the people are not available because they want to interview and they interview you and just look at what you're doing. But it might be that you're working at an hour where other people are busy and you now have something that you can use as a generator of those external ideas that you might need. And then the third one, which really has kind of struck me here, is the idea of foundational information about testing, the ideas of oracles and expectations, and needing to think about what do we expect as an output. You can't align to an intent if you haven't figured out what your intent is. So this generative AI, it's a really good helper, but it is very much an insufficient guide, and you have to be in control of your current knowledge. So if you think of the marketing texts, you could use some of these kind of general approaches of kind of like, what kind of things we're trying to do with generative AI or AI in the first place in the space of testing. So if you think of kind of acting humanly for testing, you would probably want to communicate, you'd want to represent knowledge, you probably want to do some kind of automated reasoning, probably something in the space of learning with a machine, maybe look at things with a computer vision. And robotics, it might be that the robotics aspect or angle on this whole acting humanly thing is the least bit of AI in all of this space. But if you don't have a way of clicking buttons and manipulating, well, both virtual or computer items that you have on your software, or even the physical things that you need to access, probably there's still more areas of application that we can use and create good solutions on. So breaking things down helps you kind of reveal that marketing smokescreen and get a bit better visibility. So don't call things just AI or automation. Go into what does it actually do and break it down into smaller bits, smaller pieces, and create your own vocabulary where you can understand whether this thing and that thing are actually the same, or if there's just a minor small difference between those two. For pairing, I have absolutely fell in love since that interview with the idea that I can pair with AI, generative AI, even when the developer won't pair with me. Most developers in general nowadays do pair with me. I've been in the industry for 28 years, and I've been doing pairing and ensemble testing and ensemble programming for the last 10 years. So I have a fairly decent practice towards pairing and ensembling. So working on a single computer with either two people or even more people than just two. But when they are not available, or when there's a thing that I don't want to bring other people into, maybe there's a reason for that, whatever the reason is, being able to pair with generative AI is an absolute great experience. So there's all these kind of like explain this piece to me. There's this fix this thing for me. Decide based on the way that it's trying to fix things, whether you actually want it fixed or if you were happy with it. And in many ways, that generative AI in your pair testing scenario, it's like this external imagination where, well, it might make you laugh, it might make you better, it might challenge you, and even the laughing, the idea that you don't like what it generates you, the small amount of competition you enter into that work that you're doing probably makes you a better version of you. So you absolutely should go about and use it for as a pairing thing. And for the guardrails or the ideas of how we work with these expected values and oracles, my three rules that I nowadays use then out of this all learning is focusing on how do we know expected values, not caring about the particular tool, but caring about the features and categorizations of the features in the tools. And then most importantly, the idea that we are continuously learning. So if we talked about lifelong learning before, that's no longer the case. It is it's now actually task-wide learning. So continuously with the external imagination, you're growing your capability, and you're trying to make yourself the better version of you on a daily basis. And everything you do in testing becomes or has always been, but is now supported a little bit more with that idea that it is a learning activity. So I've at least definitely found a better version of me using these. The programmer side of all of these tools, I recommend watching Henrik Nieberg's keynote talk from JFocus. I just took a screenshot of it because I thought it was so funny that now we have manual coding. And if you compare kind of my journey on how I went about this, well, maybe I had manual coding of test automation at some point, but I definitely jumped directly into this AI in my IDE. My AI copy paste from ChatGPT came only later. It wasn't actually a step in between, but it was the other way around. And even though this mentions cursor as kind of like with agents, I'm pretty convinced, and I can confirm that from today's experience, that whatever one of these tools makes available, the others will follow. So agents are a part of Copilot these days as well. So if we then kind of sum up what Copilot, GitHub Copilot is, it's very different now than it was in 2021. It's now something that is available in the IDE. It still does code completions. It still allows me to generate code and choose out of 10 options or whatever number of options it gives me. But it now also does things like contextual help. I can point at a line that I couldn't in 2001 and tell it to explain it to me or fix it for me or document it for me. It does now code reviews for my selection, and it also allows me to use MCP, these kind of agent mode protocol-based tools directly from the IDE that do some of the work for me. So small tasks, I get the kind of assistance now already within that IDE. And there's also aspects of it now that are available only on the GitHub side. So going into the shared repository from where all of us can pull the code from. Now there's RAG, retrieval augmented generation, kind of like knowledge-based type of features. And there's even an AI reviewer for pull requests that you can take into use. So out of these 6 things, one of them was there in 2001. So whatever day I end up talking about it, I will check what's now available. And of course, I will also see some of this stuff grow in my day-to-day work of using these. So
Marie, you've just got about 2 minutes left.
Yes, this is my last slide. So summing, we talked about this already. Be careful. AI is the marketing smokescreen. Generative AI pair testing is the way to think of this, and you will need to be in the driver's seat and in control, and your essentials of testing oracles, expected values, thinking of the intent, not assuming that it's correct just because you got that thing in front of your face. Those are the guardrails that I brought from this. So that's what I had for the talk.